So Joseph, and before this story, he is, the brothers came and he accused them of being spies, and he kept the second oldest brother as a hostage, kind of speak. It said, "Go get your younger brother." And so when he got home to his dad, he said, "Hey, Dad, they 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 kept our brother, but he wants to see Benjamin." And his dad goes, "No, not doing it." And it's interesting because Reuben says, "Listen, I'll take Benjamin, but if something happens to him, you can kill my sons." Hello, what's that about? Like the fact that's even part of a negotiation, right? Is kind of, uh, granddad, you can kill your grandsons if something happens. It's just bizarre, right? And so finally they start to run out of food. And his dad goes, "Yeah, go ahead." And he goes, "Nope, not going without Benjamin." And so he said, "Well, fine, take him." And so they come back to Joseph. Joseph hosts a big party for him, where they all get drunk. That's a great Bible story, right? And one of the questions Joseph's asked is, "So how's your father? How's he doing? He okay?" "Oh yeah, he's good." Uh, and all the brothers reunited, and Joseph sent them home, but he had all the money put back in their bags again, and then he had his silver cup that he used for divination placed in Benjamin's bag. And then he had him. Then he sent soldiers after him. They chased him, and said, "Okay, Benjamin's going to be my slave for now on." And then Reuben just pours out his heart and goes, "Listen, I already lost one brother, and it almost killed my dad. This will kill him. Take me." So really put himself out there, of being willing to take his younger brother's place. And so that brings us to our story from God's Word. So Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of his attendants. So he called out and said, "Send everybody away from me." So there wasn't anybody with him except his brothers when he revealed himself to them. But Joseph wept so loudly that Pharaoh's household could hear it, the Egyptians could hear it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers couldn't even answer him because they were terrified in his presence. And so Joseph said to his brothers, "Please, come near." So they came near, and he said, I'm Joseph, your brother, the one you sent into Egypt. And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for 2 years, and it's going to be in the land for 5 more years. There's not going to be any plowing or harvesting. God, He sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Therefore, it wasn't you who sent me here, but God. He made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. And there's our story from God's Word. So let's kind of walk through this again, because I love the first part of this story especially. So Joseph could no longer keep what?
Keep composure.
Yeah, he could no longer keep his composure in front of who was there. Do you remember? His brothers there, but his attendants. And so he called out and said,
Send him away.
yeah, send everybody away from me. So there wasn't anybody there but
his brothers.
Yeah, but his brothers, when he revealed himself to them. But he was what?
Weeping, crying.
Yeah, he was weeping so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also
Pharaoh's household.
Yeah, Pharaoh's household heard it. Joseph said to his brothers,
I'm Joseph.
yeah, I'm Joseph. And then he asked a question.
Is my father still alive?
My father's still alive. And they said, yeah, he's doing great, man. For an old geezer, he's doing pretty well.
They were terrified.
Oh, yeah, they couldn't answer him because they were terrified in his presence. And Joseph said to them, what? Come
closer.
Yeah, come near to me. And they came near, and he said, I am, a second time, he said, I am
Joseph.
I'm Joseph.
Sold into Egypt or something like that.
Yeah, I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. And now don't be grieved or
Frightened?
angry. Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, very similar. Angry with yourselves for selling me here because
God sent me.
Yeah, God sent me ahead of you for a purpose. Do you remember the purpose? To preserve life. For the famine has been in the land
2 years.
and
It's gonna be 5 more.
For 5.
and there's not going to be any
Flying.
Plowing.
or
Sowing.
plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as it's an interesting word, as a remnant within the land, and to keep you alive by a great something.
Miracle.
Pretty close, yeah, a great deliverance, which I thought was interesting because there's a great deliverance here, and then we see another one in 400 years, right? So therefore, he says it wasn't
You, but God.
Yeah, but God who sent me. He has made me, and he lists 3 things that God did. He made me a father for Pharaoh, the Lord of his entire household, and it gets bigger and bigger, ruler over all the land of Egypt. So, yeah, good job, guys. Now, I love this story. I mean, just think about this. We're not given exact time frames, all right? But this has been years in the making, right? I mean, Joseph has demonstrated, I mean, for his brothers to come there, stay for however long they stay, then go back home, stay back home till they ran out of food, and then come back. This is not anything that happened overnight, right?
2 years. 2 years it seems.
Yeah, this has been a while, and so, what do you think it might have been like for Joseph to keep to keep this secret inside? What might have been going on emotionally with him? What was that, Cheryl?
I think he was dealing with his feelings. I'm sorry.
Dealing with his feelings. Okay. All right.
I
In
think
what way do you see him dealing with his feelings?
I think just letting it sink, going through his mind, and what is all going on? What is letting it sink in and processing it?
All right. Cheryl, how about you?
I think he was dealing with a lot of stress because he didn't know how it was all going to work out. And he just couldn't, I mean, that much time goes by and he doesn't know what's going to happen, that could be a long-term stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there was some fear also, fear that his family might really have just deteriorated to nothing, been full of just really bad types. His dad might have died, his mothers might have died. There may have been very little left. I mean, he was afraid. I don't think he could rely on the information from either Levi, who was still in prison, or the people the brothers that were coming. They're going to put the best face forward and do partial truths. So
Yeah.
there's that fear for 2 years
Yeah.
that I might not have a family anymore.
Yeah. All right. Sam, I see you.
He knows this is going to last 7 years, so he knows if they're still alive, they'll be coming back. He knows God's put him there for just this time. It makes me think of a saying a friend used to have: long runs the fox. He's biding his time just till this all pans out. Because he doesn't have all the time in the world, but
Yeah. Yeah.
years.
Yeah. He's got plenty of food. So
Yeah.
yeah, Andrew.
I think it's very interesting too. What Sam said sparked something. He was the one that was standing there making sure the food was given out, which to me seems that's not the leader's job. That's a delegated responsibility.
Yeah.
He was waiting for his family to come. And maybe, I think he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, just throw that out there.
All right. Well, let's look at the first part of this story. So Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all of his attendants. So he called out, "Send everybody away from me." So there wasn't anybody with him except his brothers when he revealed himself to them. But Joseph wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also Pharaoh's household heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But they couldn't answer him because they were terrified in his presence. So we'll stop right there. So, we in our introduction, we talked a little bit about, how his oldest brother really kind of, we have the expression fell on his sword. He really put himself out there, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Joseph lost his composure just after his brother had made this confession of his willingness to sacrifice himself. So do we learn anything? We talked a little bit about what it might have been like. Do we learn anything more officially about his emotional condition from the fact that he couldn't keep his composure any longer?
I think he's seen a change in his brothers from back when they sent him on his wee journey.
I love that expression, his wee journey. So, yeah, I like that. Yeah, Cheryl.
I think it shocked him. I think it was very surprising that Reuben said that, and it just opened up a whole new scene. He could look back and what happened to him and realize that it really had an effect on, at least on Reuben. But
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got to have been wondering, how is he going to do this timing of it? He wants to reveal who he is. And it's like, it just comes on him that now is the time, and all this emotion comes with it at the same time. So then you get this kind of urgency of, I just got to get everybody out. Because, he probably planned on just, having a little, well, I'd like to talk to these guys alone. I don't need you at this time.
Right.
And
Right.
and instead it kind of puts this urgency on it, like, hurry up and get out of here before I blow.
Okay. All right. Andrew?
I think Reuben's real colors came out again because he had wanted to free Joseph.
Yeah.
And now Joseph gets to see that not everyone was opposed to him. As a matter of fact, it may have just mostly been Levi and one or two others that just persuaded everyone else to do that. And so I think had Reuben been smart enough to have delegated to 3 or 4 of the younger brothers, don't sell him regardless of anything else, we're going to set him free, might have actually worked, but Reuben's real colors come out, and he doesn't blame anyone else for it. It shows another interesting thing about him, that he takes the responsibility as the oldest son.
Yeah.
This is a real problem. So very interesting. I really enjoy seeing Reuben's real
growth. Yeah. Cheryl.
Well, also we have to remember that his sons are at stake here. So that could have been part of his motivation for begging.
Yeah. To our knowledge, he offered that, but that was not taken. So to our best knowledge, it came up in the conversation, which to me was just so weird. As a grandfather, I can't imagine my son having that conversation with me, right? But still, that's before this, we have seen Joseph through this whole process. I mean, he's a player, right? He's a gamesman. Okay. I mean, because it's putting the money back in the bags and putting the cup in the bags and all this stuff, which, honestly for me, that's been a little disturbing for him. I've really pondered us doing part of that as a story, but that's just, those sections are just so long, and I couldn't see a lot of real meat that we could chew on for a long story like that. But so what might we learn about Joseph's sense of timing from the fact that now all of a sudden he's, was it, Sam, was it you that just said he just kind of lost it? Oh, that was okay. Now, yeah. So what do we learn about, do you think he's accomplished what he intended to accomplish? I mean, what do you see there?
If he hasn't, he's got close enough to it that he's willing to just lay it all out there.
Okay.
And see how it falls. Because at the end of the day, he can have been thrown in jail or killed or whatever he wants.
Yeah. He's the ruler over all the land of Egypt. That's pretty bold statement. Yeah, Andrew.
He's had 9 years now of dealing with con artists, because in the time of plenty, nobody wants to pay their 20%. I don't remember what the tax figure was. It was pretty low.
Yeah,
but
pretty hefty. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna try to get out of that no matter how much. And that, especially that 7th year, I can imagine was the biggest harvest of history. And now he's got 2 years into an even worse type of con. People sending, I don't know where you guys live, but here in Mexico, if the store says you can buy 3 wipes, there's going to be 17 people from the family, everybody buying 3, okay? So, I mean, he's dealing with con artists galore, and he's winning every time. And so here he's setting up his own long con on his family. And one of the problems with dealing with people is that you just never know what's going to happen. And I think he's the one that got played in the end by his own game, that he couldn't control himself at the end there. He just blew up.
I like that. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah, played by his own game. That's.
Did you want to be a con man in another knife, Andrew?
Yeah,
You were thinking that too.
I know that religion really pays well if you don't love God. And,
Yeah, Diane.
All man that faith, basically.
Yeah, I think it works out well that Joseph shows some vulnerability to them. He might have been planning to be all cool about this, and they're already terrified. So the size, nobody likes to watch men cry. That's just an ugly thing. But it does show, I think that softens it a bit for them when they think about it.
Okay.
So that it's sometimes, you want to be all composed about something, and it can be better just to let your guard down a bit.
Yeah, Silvana.
I think at a point as well, he could be enjoying seeing his dreams coming through.
Yeah.
And perhaps he was for himself and for them, like, let it all happen. And then when he revealed himself, was just for them, like, wow, that was all right, what he's done, what he had dreamed.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, what might we learn about this weeping? I mean, the weeping is so loud that the Egyptians could hear it, and that that Pharaoh's house, and not all, but Pharaoh's household also heard it. So do you think these are just people on the other side of the door, or do you picture this as being some distance away? I mean, what do you see in here?
I think he was just putting out his frustration, his everything. Could be a mixture of everything, the hurt from the time he was in prison, the hurt from remembering his brothers doing, and then at the same time, like, yes, I got it, I'm here. And I think just a mixture of everything he was feeling. It was just letting it go.
That it could have been part terrifying for his brothers too. I remember a friend telling me, he was a doctor, he worked in a hospice, but the first time he had to tell an African-American family that someone had died in their family, and he said he was terrified. The grief, very verbal, very physical, and he says he backed up to a wall, and it was a nurse explained to him, no, in that culture, that's what happens. If it doesn't happen, they didn't love them.
It's interesting.
So, yeah.
I like the way you said that. If they didn't love him, it doesn't happen. I think that's really something. I had not known that. So that's probably true.
Yeah.
I think also, you think of all that screaming going on in that room. That the guard, the personal guard, is getting ready to walk in. I mean, that would be Potiphar and everyone behind him, and let's find out what's going on. So the fact that they didn't go in is very telling of Joseph's authority. That if he said get out, it meant get out.
But they were probably a lot of people kind of like interested in what was going on, eavesdropping and
Getting ready to go in.
And it makes me wonder if he lived or where he worked. I don't know, was like there by Pharaoh's house, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they probably. I'm picturing in my head that they're all relatively close to each other, but it seems like for him to be crying that loudly would be for things to have to carry.
If he is so powerful, and Pharaoh's a really shrewd person, he's going to have him pretty close, just in case.
Yeah. Well, Diane.
And also that he's probably switched at this point to Hebrew. That he's switched to the language of his brothers, and so it may well be that these Egyptians outside aren't understanding any of the dialogue. They're just hearing, what's going on.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that and we're not told, but very easily could be. Yeah,
It would seem like you would want to speak out of that language
in
of your
heart
childhood.
language. Yeah, Cheryl, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just thinking about how maybe this was just pent up for a long, long time in him, this grief, and then now it's like turned around to joy mixed with grief, but maybe he's just held this in for years and years and didn't ever really have a real place to express it. So
yeah, or anybody it's safe to express it to, right?
Yeah, who would understand?
Who are you going to tell? Yeah, Andrew.
No, I was agreeing with Cheryl.
Okay. Well, in his statement, I'm Joseph. I mean, just you almost sense that he just like, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? Now, if you remember in an introduction, he'd already asked him questions about their father. So what might we learn about the fact that he kind of repeats this? I mean, how do you picture him? How do you hear him asking that question? Is my father still alive?
Personal.
Okay, yeah.
It's like you're not talking now to the ruler, the Lord, or all those. You're talking to Joseph, the brother.
Yeah, and Joseph is crying out now to his brothers. I picture like, is he really still alive? I mean, I need to know how he's doing. Now, do we learn anything about a Jewish family from the fact he only asked about his father and not his mother?
His mother's dead already.
Yeah.
He's got his.
But what about? I'm sorry. I meant to ask about the rest of the family. He didn't. Sisters.
Stepmothers.
Yeah. It's just
concubine that his mother's concubine.
Well, I mean, he's the youngest, so the one most likely to have passed away is his dad.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah.
If he was his dad's blue-eyed boy, that is going to be his thing because he'll remember his dad so well with the coat and all that malarkey. So yeah, and maybe a bit culturally, the patriarch.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Andrew.
Also, the fact that he knew they were telling him what he wanted to hear at first. As your dad, our dad's alive, everyone's fine in the family, blah blah blah, and now he wants reality. Does he need a doctor? I've got plenty of doctors here, whatever, So yeah, maybe that's what he was really looking for, was truth now. Details.
Well, let's jump down to the second part of the story before we talk about the brothers' terror. And then Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. And they came near, and he said, I'm Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. Now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land now for 2 years, and there's 5 years left, where there won't be any plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to set you up as a remnant within the land, and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. So therefore, it wasn't you that sent me here, it was God. It's God that made me a father to Pharaoh, made me Lord over his entire household, ruler over all the lands of Egypt. So what do we learn about the brothers from the fact that, you know, they're terrified in Joseph's presence? And remember, who else is in the room?
No one.
Funny.
Yeah, just them. And they are terrified of their brother's presence. So, what
They're
might
not
we,
stupid.
the what?
They're not stupid.
Okay, yeah, not stupid, right?
We got caught.
Oh,
They remember the dreams and the prophecies.
oh yeah, wow.
Joseph is not the only one that remembers those prophecies.
Yeah.
Maybe at that time, all these scenes are flashing back to them about the cup in the grain and all these things, and they're realizing these were all setups. He really hates us and wants to make us suffer. And now we brought Benjamin so he can get us all. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. No, I think that could be a.
That's cold.
Yeah.
It's my wife.
They're going through that feeling in the pit of their stomach where they know violence is coming their way and there is no way out of it and it's going to hurt.
Yeah, and the fact, you know, they in one of the stories we talked about, it's been a while now, that they were going, we deserve this. You know, this is God's judgment on us. And so, but I wonder what might have been going on in their minds when Joseph said, "Please come near to me."
You first.
What's in his hand?
Yeah, Benjamin, go ahead, buddy. You're the. Yeah, but then he, you know, the what he says there. I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. But then the very next words out of his mouth: "Don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was God that sent me ahead of you." Man, what might we learn about Joseph spiritually from what we hear him saying here to his brothers?
He understands all he's went through was God's plan, God's will for him.
Okay, God's been working. Cheryl?
He had forgiven them.
You know, Joseph, since he was a young man, was raised in Potiphar's house and under all of the Egyptian education system and gods and religion, and he didn't let it affect him. I mean, he may have dressed like an Egyptian, he may have used makeup and had the ponytail, you know, whatever. Yeah, like Yul Brenner was,
Yeah.
had access to all of this stuff, but he knew who the Lord God was and served only him, it appears, in spite of everything else. He knew what the truth was and was willing to walk in that truth, regardless of the consequences to come.
Yeah, and Johnny, were you going to say something?
Yes. He knew that whatever happens, that there was a purpose behind it.
Yeah, I love it. Just none of this was an accident. Yeah. Well, we see him, you know, I love what you said there, Cheryl, that we see him forgiving his brothers. So, I mean, what were the other options? What else could he have done? Yeah.
Enjoy his turn.
Yeah.
Fulfill the prophecies. Not only bow down, but cut their heads off.
Sell them all so that they have to be slaves. Revenge.
Yeah, he can't
Sell
kill
to
them yet.
Potiphar's wife.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Diane, what, you can't kill him yet. Okay, why not?
Because he doesn't have the prize yet. He's got Benjamin, but he doesn't have his father. So, you know, he's got to have somebody go back that their father will trust. It's going to be hard to get him to go to Egypt, probably. they need to go get him and bring him back so he can kill him. You know, if he.
he-
And then, you know, if you kill a man's sons, it can really put a crimp in his day. So maybe he'll have to wait until his father dies, and then he can obliterate them.
Right, yeah, which is a whole nother story, by the way. Yeah, Sam.
He's not the type to kill them. If he's the type to do anything, he's the type to enjoy them psychologically terrified. Yeah, much more effective than physically suffering.
Yeah, more fun. Cheryl.
Oh no.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you had something.
What Sam talks about psychological suffering reminds me of one of the Peruvian presidents that caught the Shining Path guy, and every day he would torment him before he went to work.
It's not an application.
I know, but
Not
the psychological part, yeah.
Just today, I read a story about Nelson Mandela, and after he had become president, he was out at a restaurant with a group and saw a man at the next table who hadn't gotten his food yet, and requested that man come and sit with him. And the man was shaking kind of the whole time. Turns out he was one of the guards that had mistreated him when he was in prison. So the whole time the man is terrified that this is his last meal. But Mandela ends by saying, you know, that's not how I do things. But that was not, you know, a fun meal.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But as soon as you started telling the story, I thought of this this story that I just heard.
Yeah.
Compassion instead of revenge.
Well, you bring up compassion, so I want to talk about I want to talk about the hard stuff here. So we're talking about compassion, right? What might we learn about God? I mean, Joseph said 2 times here, God sent me, God sent me. In other words, God put me through all this. So to establish you as a remnant, he sent me ahead. He's going to keep you alive by great deliverance. So what do we learn about God here? That kind of blows our easy Christian answers out of the water, doesn't it?
Sorry, Cheryl.
No, go ahead.
Doesn't he say, pick up your cross and follow me? Not exactly the same, but Joseph, his life wasn't exactly roses and plain sailing.
Yeah.
I think we can assume following God's not exactly going to be roses and plain sailing.
Yeah. Cheryl?
I was just going to say that he's not opposed to us suffering to get something done that he wants to get done.
God does not define success and leadership like we would. We would think, wow, 2 years of depression, 2 years of a bad agricultural secretary, after 7 years of prosperity, and now we don't know what to do with it. He's blown it all away. And so God's idea of good leadership is a lot different than the way we look at it, I think.
Do we learn anything about God's perspective? Yeah, Johnny.
just talking about good leadership. And what I think God's viewpoint of good leadership is, how are you going to get, when the difficult times come, it shows if you actually get a leader or not. because if you can get them like talking about administration wise and money wise and health wise, if you can get them all to survive through a hard time, then you'll get a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Cheryl?
Yeah, and maybe putting Joseph through. I mean, this is just kind of aside from the story, from the brothers thing, but maybe when he put him through the suffering, being a slave and being in jail, he knew about people that were suffering. And so when he's the leader and he's portioning out the food and stuff, seems like that would help him to not be, what do you call it? Like, to be fair, with everybody and allow the people that have really hard time, to get what they need also.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
but
well,
maybe suffering sometimes helps us prepare
okay.
us for our future.
For getting leadership.
Okay. Yeah, say it.
I had a friend in Slovakia once who said to me one time, some lessons we can only learn through suffering.
Yeah.
Don't particularly want to learn them, but
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't want that degree, right?
no.
That's not our preference. But now let's think back. This whole journey with Joseph, what started the problem? Well, other than the coat.
He was telling the dreams to the brothers.
Pride.
Yeah, that everyone, everybody's gonna bow down to me.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think through the whole thing, he was learning that it wasn't about him.
Ooh. Okay, elaborate on that a little bit, Savannah. How do you see that?
Well, he had to go through like being sold and being a slave, and then when he was a good position in Potiphar's house, and then something happened, and then he's put into jail. He tells about the dreams for the two guys. It happens, but the guy forgets him there. So it's a lot of things, that expectation that he has to say, like, well, you know what, it's not about me. Because if the guy could have gone and told told Pharaoh about him, the one that, the wine guy.
Yeah.
Then it would be pretty much my dreams, or the way I interpret dreams. And it's like, it was God who took him there. So.
Yeah.
I think that it's not easy, but it's not boring either. Joseph gets to have this wide range of experiences. And for some people, that's really a valuable thing. I imagine being the youngest brother of a bunch of shepherds is not the most exciting life. You don't get, it's probably a long time before you do more than just watch the sheep, because, you're at the end of the line. It's like Joseph gets to do these kind of interesting things, run a whole household, be the one that the jailer depends on. And, even before he reaches this other stage, he gets to test himself and see what he's capable of. And that probably wouldn't have happened back home. I mean, we talked about him developing leadership, but even as he's doing some of these things, it's probably like, well, I really wish I wasn't a slave, but still it's,
You just make me think, down there, because I worked with shepherds a long time ago. They're used to solving things and working on their own. And they're very sociable when they get around people, but they're used to doing a lot of stuff on their own. So God had to take him from being very self-reliant and make him very reliant on him.
Wow. Yeah.
I've never known a shepherd.
So,
They're
Yeah.
wild.
Andrew.
You asked how this all start. And I think part of this started with the dad deciding he loved one wife more than another. Having favorites,
Yeah.
letting people know you had favorites, not just having them, but letting everyone know you had favorites, getting that code, sending Joseph to go spy on the brothers. I mean, a lot of this is dad's making.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. You know, well, one of the things we talked about was the fact that you know, God views suffering a little differently than we do, and you know, he allowed Joseph to go through these things, and we see the result of that it was prepared him for leadership and those things. I mean, I mean, we still see that happening today, right? That I mean, good people still suffer, right? I mean, what might God's use of suffering look like today? That's something we don't like to talk about much in the Western church, right? But
I think in the same way, sometimes to bring him closer to him and rely on him.
yeah,
Maybe he lets somebody lose their job and be looking for a job for a long time before they find something again, and then they have to really depend on him.
yeah.
He sometimes let them suffer to bring them close to him.
All right, that the problem brings them closer. Yeah. Sam?
I think I'm just thinking of some friends here. I think sometimes he lets people go through the things so they have an empathy and an understanding for others, and they can speak to them in a way that they can be heard because they understand, they know.
Right. Yeah.
That, where maybe you or I wouldn't be heard by them.
Yeah, you know, my grandkids have gone to the park to play so that Pop could have some silence while while I was on the Zoom call, because as you can see, they just wanted to climb all over my chair. But the littlest one, who had the bandage on her chin, that's my youngest granddaughter, and she was my daughter's water broke at 17 weeks with her. And then she was born months early, was in the NICU for over 3 months. We were told to come in and say goodbye twice, that she was going to die. And for me, other than my salvation and a forgiving thing I had to do with my father after he died, probably the most significant spiritual event of my life, because I felt something that I knew was wrong, and that if I had ever recognized it in myself, I would have been humiliated by. You know, my daughter had a miscarriage while I was in Guatemala teaching a workshop. We'd had, you know, I'd gotten a video, I played it for everybody where my grandson was reading the announcement, yada yada. And then later that afternoon, she had a miscarriage, and it was, you know, it was like for any family, right? It's devastating. And then when my daughter's water broke at 17 weeks, again while I was in Costa Rica teaching a workshop, in my mind, and I never would have verbalized this, but in my mind I was like, wow, God, if this is the way you treat your friends, you know, it's no wonder that so many people refuse to trust you. And, you know, because in my mind, I'm like, I'm doing all these things for you, I deserve extra credit, right? You know, now, even saying it out loud is embarrassing, you know, to confess that in my mind that really was at the heart of what I thought. in that situation. And so through that whole process, learning the goodness of God, he was just as good when my daughter had a miscarriage as he was when my youngest granddaughter was spared, after 3 months in the NICU. And that was a really, really painful lesson. But it's what I learned fairly well, I think. But didn't want to go through it, would not have chosen it. But those are things that, it's those lessons in life that really stand out to us. Yeah, Sam.
I just remembered I had a friend in Liberia, and I remember watching him tell the story of David and Goliath really powerfully. And it half hit me why, as we were coming back from a rubber plantation one day, as guys do, we tell our war stories, the stupid things we did and how we survived. And I was in the back of a pickup truck with guys doing it. And, my war story didn't come close to theirs, because theirs weren't their own stupidity. Theirs was war. And he had one story of his best friend getting his head cut off. Best friend, it was just another man, by some rebels at a checkpoint, and he was next. And some woman spoke the soldiers' language and tried to persuade them not to do it. And they turned to his wife and says, "Can you manage with the kids without him?" And she's like, no, please don't do it. And they spared him. But he had lots of those stories. And after watching tell David and Goliath, I realized I'll never be able to tell it like that.
Yeah. And there is a depth that comes to our faith in those areas where we have undergone some Joseph-like, and obviously his case is, I think it was safe to say that's relatively extreme, right? But still, we all have those things, and and every country has its specific areas that are more difficult than others. Well, thank you, guys. This story is in Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 8. And mostly I use the Christian Standard Bible for my preparation of this story, because they just, in English, they seem to do a pretty good job of making things a little bit more conversational. But let me stop the recording here.